The National Bureau of Statistics reported that as of June 2024, Nigeria's inflation rate has risen to 34.19% compared to the previous headline inflation rate of 33.95% in May, which indicates an increase of 0.24 percentage points. This was mentioned by the NBS in its June 2024 Consumer Price Index and Inflation Report. Now, to discuss this on the show, we have Vincent Oshoma, securities dealer, Midpoint Capital Limited. Mr. Vincent Oshoma, it's nice to have you talk to us about this.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So when you look at the primary factors contributing to Nigeria's inflation rate, does it indicate the lack of government policies, or maybe it's the implementation of those policies that's actually driving up the rates?
I will say both, because when you look at the current inflation, the major approach the government have been using, mainly from the CBN, trying to use hiking rates to target inflation. And from all indication, it seems not to be working, or not to be working as expected. So in terms of using rate hikes to target inflation, we have not really seen much progress there. In terms of also government policies on the fiscal end, trying to look at other means like trying to provide seedlings to farmers and also other efforts, we have not seen aggressive implementation. I'll give you two examples. Like one of the ways of targeting the current inflation, which we all agreed is part of the contributors, is the subsidy removal, was the introduction of CNG vehicles. Since it was announced last year, we have not seen much traction until recently, when they announced that we now have opportunity for motorists to convert their vehicles to CNG vehicles, propelled vehicles. I think that is a step in the right direction, because that will reduce fuel costs, which will lead to reduction in transportation costs, which is one of the major pull for this current inflation. But the process implementation is quite slow, and so we have not seen the expected impact on inflation from that end.
You actually mentioned a couple of things that the government can do on the fiscal side, but we have also seen a government that has removed excise duties and taxes on some items. It has pledged to work with local refiners. It has also, done a lot in terms of providing palliatives, but it seems that all these things are not enough to actually deal with the issue of inflation in the country. But then there have also been, of course, the government has been advised that it should open up its borders so that the markets can be flooded with varieties of commodities. Probably that can drive down the prices of commodities in the market, and like you mentioned, address the issue around insecurity and erratic power supply. So when you look at these issues isolatedly, do you think it can help in any way, or do you think there are some bottlenecks that the government will need to deal with before it's able to effectively implement these measures?
Yes, like I mentioned, those issues that are being talked about by the government, they are issues that definitely will help in tackling the current inflation. And so that's why I said there are some things that have been mentioned. But one of the major things, especially from the fiscal side, is the implementation of those things. Because right from last year, we're hearing talks about the steps being taken, but we have seen little or no implementation with respect to them, or the traction with respect to implementation is quite slow. And also, you now bring us back to the issue of the recent effort, removing tariff 150 days for a lot of items, which is a step in the right direction. But there is also another angle to it, the fact that is going to affect some of the policies that the government have implemented, which is to drive local production. There's a lot of investors that have gone into the production of some of these commodities. Removing excise duties, I think it will affect the plan. Also, I want to believe that there is a comprehensive approach to this in respect to make sure that in the need to solve the issue of inflation, we don't disrupt the value chain in terms of the local producers. I think that is very important thing to consider.
But these local producers are still having issues importing raw materials. They don't have access to loans from banks. Even the loans that they've secured, the interest rate keeps rising, so they have to pay more for it. There are issues around, power supply, and it eventually, adds to the cost of production. So when we have, these inhibitions within the local industry, how well do you think they'll be able to thrive if we can have other measures to actually drive down in the inflation rates?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why I said that you need to look at the issues comprehensively. to encourage local producers, because when you mention the issue of the removal of excise duty, especially for those importation of the commodities, we are not looking at importation of the machineries and other raw materials, mainly the commodities. I think that will really encourage the importers more than the local producers of these commodities. I think there should be more effort in trying to encourage local production than trying to bring in already made goods into the country, like what is being done. So that's why I said it has to be a comprehensive approach. And this short-term measure in trying to remove excise duties from importation, I think it should really be a short-term, so that we don't use a short-term measure to solve long-term issues. At the end of the day, we have issues. That's what we have with respect to subsidy. Subsidy was supposed to be a short-term gap. At the end of the day, we allowed it to stay longer than necessary, and we now have issues with removing it. So I don't want us to have a situation whereby we will adopt these short-term measures in solving long-term issues, and at the end of the day, we get into bigger problems really in the overall economy.
All right, Vincent. Now, we are counting down to the next NPC meeting. Do you think the committee should yet again increase the interest rates?
The committee, from all indications, like the last statement by the CBN governor talking about the plan to wind down interest rate reducing, just stop the hike. But you also have to recognize the fact that the CBN is also looking at the inflationary pressures and also the stability of the naira. And will continue, these issues have remained with us. So I think the CBN, from all indications, the hike seems not to be achieving its intended purpose. So they should also look at other options rather than just rate hike, because rate hike either to increase liquidity and to target inflation seems not to be working, but rather it is affecting the economy, because increase in rates will definitely affect local producers and also consumption. So I think it's something that you also have to look at, because it seems not to be achieving its intended purpose. So further rate hikes, I don't think we achieve the purpose of increasing liquidity in the forex market and also targeting inflation.
So another side of this top business story that we're looking at is Nigeria's central bank's move to actually stabilize the naira. Now, Nigeria's currency, the naira, is expected to see some gains in the coming weeks following renewed determination of the CBN to promote stability and reduce volatility in the foreign exchange market. The latest of these moves was the Apex Bank's intervention in the foreign exchange market on Friday by selling the sum of $122.67 million to about 46 authorized dealers. So, Vincent, based on what you've observed so far, are the interventions of the Apex Bank working?
Yes, that intervention was a welcome development, because it helped. Because we have seen, before now, we are looking at the naira at 1,004, 1,005 levels, but seems to be running away from the 1,005 levels to 1,006 levels. So that intervention brought some level of stability, but we need sustained intervention, because it is not enough for you to see such intervention. If it is not sustained, or we don't have other source of liquidity in the market, we will not be able to properly manage the naira. So I think other measures need to be adopted, and all we have to see sustained intervention in the market, which we also have to look at the CBN's ability to sustain such intervention. So it has to do with a lot of the policies that we need to stabilize naira. The major thing is that as much as the CBN is trying to intervene, we need to increase production and ability to export. So it is not alone. It's not enough for the CBN to continue to try to stabilize the naira. We also need to see other measures by the fiscal policy makers in terms of improve local production and also to attract foreign investors into the economy.
So then, what are the long-term implications of the CBN's continuous efforts to actually improve liquidity in the foreign exchange market?
The long-term implication is that if they are able to sustain liquidity, then we'll see naira stabilize at a certain level, because initially we saw it stabilize around the 1,005 level, and especially as we approach the September season, when people will start thinking of going back to school, and we'll see some pressures and also travels, people making some international travel holidays. We'll expect to see some pressures on the currency as people start changing their naira to dollar to fund such moves. So I think there need to be more stabilization and more intervention to be able to stabilize the naira around this period.
All right, so we're talking about stability, we're talking about intervention, but we also see that the CBN actually suspended the supply of forex to bureau de change operators. Now, how do you think that would affect the market and the value of the naira?
Yes, when you look at stabilizing the bureau de change operator, I think the CBN has been taking steps in cleaning that sector, because if you look at it very well, there have been a lot of sharp practices in the bureau de change operation in Nigeria, and the CBN has tried to clean up the sector with trying to tell them to re-license and also to know the major operators. I think if they're able to do that and also provide some level of supply to that sector, that's part of the market, I think it will help in bringing stability into the forex market. But remember, the level of control, the level of their contribution to the market is quite small. And also recent move by the CBN to try and bring in the IMNTOs operators into the mainstream market, I think that will also help in stabilizing that the parallel market, because they can also provide liquidity for that market too.
And we also see that Nigeria's external reserves has increased to about $35.05 billion. What does this mean for the country's economic stability?
Yeah, it's a good thing, because the level of your reserve determines your ability, will determine a long way the ability of CBN to intervene in the forex market. So the increase in the reserve, especially being the first time to get into such level since this administration, is a welcome development. But you also have to recognize the part that has to do with some of the recent borrowings by the government. So we need more efforts, more other measures to improve the foreign reserve rather than just borrowings. And that's why we also have to talk about Nigerians' ability to export. Now, there's a talk about Dangote's refinery. With the increase in production and increase in export, we want to provide some of the forex needs. We also need, beyond Dangote refinery, we also need to look at other companies or other sectors that can be able to provide meet the forex needs of the Nigerians, beyond just depending on one company and also the CBN.
Okay, all right. Vincent Oshoma, securities dealer, Midpoint Capital Limited, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on the show.
Thanks for having me.